Welcome to another edition of Recovery Happens. Today we're going to be sitting down with Kyle as he offers hope to encourage recovery.
So I was born in Lapeer. I grew up mostly in Imlay City. My mom and dad are great. I had a pretty great childhood. They divorced when I was really young, before I can even remember. But they, to this day, remained really good friends. It was like the best divorce in history, basically. To where, I was able to go to my dad's house out on the farm and like run around and, on the weekends, every other weekend for a while, or just whenever he was able to do it. But for the most part, I lived with my mom growing up and my sister. When somewhere between the first and third grade, we kind of moved around a little bit, a couple schools and stuff like that. But we ended up coming back to Imlay City when I was around the fourth grade. And I stayed in Imlay City through graduation.
When and how did you realize you had a problem with drugs or alcohol? When did drugs come into the picture?
So at a very young age, probably around 5 or 6, I remember like stealing beers out of my dad's back fridge porch and going down by the barns and taking sips out of them and things like that. I remember that happening at a pretty early age. As far as like actually getting into stuff like that, probably happened, probably around the time I was like 10 to 13, in that range. I remember being drunk for the first time when I was 10. Same thing, stealing beers off the back porch or grandma's grape wine that she made out of the basement. And I do remember being that young and also like the actual feeling of being drunk and being like, oh my God, this is like the best thing ever. At that time too, like I said, my grandma had these boxes of wine that she made out of our grapevines, like from years and years ago, that no one ever noticed down in the basement. So there was a good summer there where my buddies and I would kind of run down there and, split a bottle every other day and see how that went, and just do dumb stuff. I do remember also when I was probably about 13 or maybe even a little younger than that, smoking weed for the first time. I did it once at a party. It was my buddy's older brother's party, and I didn't get high. I didn't like really feel the effects of it. I was scared. So I kind of just like took a small hit or whatever. But then the next time, which was a couple weeks later, I ended up, just me and my buddy smoking and getting really high and enjoying it a lot. So that kind of sparked me off on a thing to where going into late middle school and high school, I was like the experienced pot smoking kid. And this also like started me on a path of getting in trouble legally. When I was, I think 11, I shot a kid with a paintball gun. And they called the cops. I ended up getting into the system for assault and battery with a weapon when I was like 11. And then the next year I got caught with marijuana in school. I was in the 7th grade. And it was this whole big thing. I got suspended for 10 days. Some people got expelled in that whole thing for like indefinitely. Ever since then, it was basically on this thing through the age of like 28, of every other year being on probation for getting into trouble. And 99%, basically that 11-year-old assault and battery was my only non-alcohol or drug-related charge. Through high school, I got several MIPs starting at like age 14 or 15. And it didn't slow me down though. What I would end up doing is, instead of smoking weed, on the weekends, my buddies would come over and we'd all split a case of beer. Because at that time I wasn't aware of any kind of alcohol testing. They were drug testing me, but I wasn't alcohol testing. So like I said, every other year for an extended period of time, I was in trouble with the law, and I ended up, basically switching back and forth between weed and alcohol. And I remember this to a T. I was 19, graduated high school, made it through all that. I was doing Xanax semi-regularly. I was working at a restaurant. I was able to do them at work, which I don't know if they noticed, but I thought nobody noticed. And we couldn't get them that day. And we were going to get a gift for a Sweetest Day gift for my girlfriend at the time, my buddies and I, and they all got Vicodin. And I remember taking 5 Vicodin and feeling really good for the first time. And ever since that day, opiates became my primary drug of choice. That shortly followed by I remember picking up shifts at work for 23 days in a row, and getting opioids every day, whether it was oxys, or Vicodin or Lortabs, some kind of pharmaceuticals every day that were opiates. And I do remember coming out of that little run and realizing I was getting sick and thinking, oh my God, I crossed the line. I'm an addict now. Getting into it quite early was a part of my story, and then just continuing it, progressing, to get worse.
What has life been like since recovery happened to you?
So recovery's been great. I feel like I shouldn't overlap the fact that, from 19 to 28, my opioid dependency became more and more and progressed. There was a time that I switched and tried Suboxone treatment, where then I kept subbing things and getting back on Xanax, and alcohol was always part of my thing throughout this whole thing. But I basically, the last year I was out, so from 27 to 28, I started getting heroin, and that's when heroin became a daily thing for me. I had lost my license because of DUIs at this time, and it just continued to get bad. I started stealing from my dad every day. I could not stop stealing from my dad, and basically found a way to get to Flint, Michigan without a license every day in order to support my habit, which ended up costing me roughly $160 a day. And basically I did that for a solid year, where I just continued to get worse, get skinnier. My friends who also used opiates, but weren't quite doing heroin every day at this time, were telling me, dude, you're getting bad. You look horrible. And I'm like, you look horrible. It's the same thing, blah, blah, blah. I couldn't look at myself 100%, and see the truth that it doesn't matter what everybody else is doing. I'm getting really bad. My arms are all chewed up. Like I said, I could not stop stealing from my dad. And my last time going there, I waited till my dad fell asleep. I stole $100 out of his wallet. I took his truck. I went to Flint. I was there. I ended up getting crack and heroin, and I got back at 6 a.m., had to work at 7 a.m., and I was still sick. And I ended up just looking up at the rafters of my ceiling and being like, the only way out of this is to hang myself. And that was the first serious thought I've ever had of suicide. And I couldn't do it. I wasn't able to go any further than that. So I ended up writing a note to my dad, said, hey, call Mom, I need help. So the next day my dad called my mom. We got on the phone with Access, and I got a date to go into Sacred Heart, which was April 2nd, 2016. So back to the original question, what recovery has done for me, and going into Sacred Heart, I had this beautiful experience, that I now recognize as my true step one experience. But at the time I didn't really realize what was going on, but I was there for 3 days. I was ready to go. I was ready to just give up on it, leave, lie and manipulate my mom or my parents to get me out of there. And I somehow made it to my 2 o'clock group, where the first time this had ever happened to me, I decided to talk about it with these people honestly. I said, I'm ready to go. This isn't for me. I'm going to leave. And the coolest thing happened. Everybody there, my group, grouped up around me and said, give it a couple more days. You've only been here for 3 days, give it some time. And then when we left that meeting, they followed me and, became my rehab group, and from that moment on, I made a decision was made for me to say, why not actually give this a try? Believe in it, don't believe in it. I'm going to just do what everybody says. and see if I can be one of these 1 in a million that makes it out of this.
What's been your biggest triumph in recovery?
Oh God. I really was able to, like I said, just follow suggestions so that I didn't have to make a whole lot of decisions besides, okay, pay this bill, make this amends. This is what was suggested of me. I think my biggest triumph is being able to have an opportunity to go back to make amends with my mom and my dad, and really understanding their perspective of what it was like. Being in recovery, our business, we see a lot of people relapse and make these stupid decisions and lie, and that's things that I used to do daily. I put my family in an unfair position to possibly have to lie or not omit things just to not talk about what I was doing. So I was able to sit down with my mom and make amends with her, and I sat down with my dad and I made amends with him. And now our relationship is the best it's ever been. My sister, our relationship's the best it's ever been. We don't see each other that much, but it's cool to be able to hug my family instead of being ashamed to see them and trying to hide from them. I really, really appreciate them sticking up with me, and I really appreciate the fact that I have my own family now, and I want it to be what they wanted for me, and that's just to be happy and healthy.
Thank you for watching this edition of Recovery Happens. If you or someone you know is struggling with addiction, please give us a call at 888-68-BWROC. We'd like to thank our sponsor, Tusha Balba Productions.